Hey gang, this podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. As you all know, this is a business that I started to give back more to conservation. We roast premium coffee and our coffee ships out within 6 hours of roasting, guaranteeing that you get the freshest coffee available at your doorstep. The kicker, we donate 10% of all of our proceeds back to conservation. You choose where the donation goes at checkout. You can check us out at skullbrewcoffee.com. And for a limited time, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get 15% off your purchase. So let's do some good together and help protect wild places one cup at a time. Visit skullbrewcoffee.com and pledge your support of conservation today. What's up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well out there. I just got back from this past weekend. I was at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg again, hanging out with my buddies from Exodus. Of course, John was there with Wicked and Glacier. Got to spend some time with some friends, ran into some of the folks over at BHA Pennsylvania chapter, of course. So a good time was had by all, but I had, on my drive home, I was just kind of thinking about deer season because I got kind of stoked after we recorded this podcast there today. And I have to say that I probably need to temper my enthusiasm just a little bit for deer season because otherwise I'm going to have a super long winter and a very long spring and summer. I'm already kind of jazzed up. I did pick up, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last podcast up front, but I did pick up, while I was at the show, a new release. So I started I mentioned this before that I wanted to start trying to shoot, a thumb release or some form or fashion of back tension release. And the thumb release, I guess, is a method of that if you use it properly. So I ended up picking up a Carter just because release and have been working with that a little bit. So I do need to make some tweaks to my setup to make sure that I'm kind of comfy with everything, make sure my body is aligned the way it needs to be, but did just kind of start playing around with it at the house here a little bit. And man, I got to tell you, I really like it. It's something I've been kind of wanting to make the change to. And I finally just kind of decided to take the plunge and making the transition thus far, just kind of playing around with it a little bit that I've got the opportunity to. It's not, it hasn't been that overwhelming. I think, one of the things I'm doing is I'm starting kind of small and shooting just short distances. I haven't shot beyond 15 yards with it at this point, just trying to get comfy with it. I'll be hitting my buddy up, old Greg Litzinger, the bow hunting fiend. I'll be headed over to his place to put the bow on the press here at some point to try to tighten some things up and make sure that I'm set up properly. It's like, there's always the argument of are you changing your draw length, or are you changing your D loop? That's the little bit of 6 in one, half dozen in the other. Because right now I'm however you want to frame it, whether it's draw length, it's not draw length specifically, but because I changed releases, my anchor points have changed, I guess is the best way to put it. So I have to solve for how I kind of readjust my anchor points to make sure everything is as it should be, and my head's not dipping too much whenever I'm trying to get into my peep, and and all those things are kind of in the right places. So there's a bunch of different ways you can solve for that. And what I'm going to do is just really go spend a day with Greg at his place and do some shooting and some testing and trying a couple different things of, maybe I might be placing my hands incorrectly, and anchoring incorrectly with the new release. So we're going to check that out. Might need to lengthen the D loop, might need to add a little bit of draw length. It just kind of depends. There's, it's one of those things we were texting back and forth, and his comment was, you change one thing, you change everything. So we're going to kind of take a look at that, and then hopefully I'll be kind of ship shape. And then at that point, I'll be able to order and get my new bow in, which I'm pretty stoked about, because I was shooting the Obsession Fixation this past year, which was a super rad bow. And they have a shorter bow that came out this year, so I shot it at ATA. I think John and I mentioned that when we did our ATA kind of recap, but the FX30 is a 30-inch axle-to-axle bow that Obsession's putting out this year, and it shoots really well. I really like it, so that's what I'm actually going to end up shooting this year. So before I make that plunge, I want to kind of figure out if I'm going to lengthen my draw length at all to compensate for, kind of repositioning my anchor points and stuff like that. Look, I wouldn't be upset if I got an extra half-inch of draw since I do have the Tyrannosaurus Rex arms at 26.5 inches, so 27 would make me feel better. But I'm not going to do anything hasty and add draw length if it's not required. If I can fix it another way by adding some D loop or just moving my peep around and stuff like that, because I want to make sure first and foremost that I'm comfortable and that I'm shooting accurately, and not necessarily worry about so much my draw length. Not going to get into the macho contest, but. Enough of that on this upfront. I have a super cool show for you guys today. So on today's show, we have Cody DeQuisto Chad Sylvester from Exodus is coming back. Cody, of course, of Lone Wolf Custom Gear and XOP. And then my brother from another mother, of course, Johnny Utah, is on as well. And we were all at Harrisburg together. And it was one of those things I was, talking to Cody for a little while and trying to get him on the show. And we just kind of kept missing each other through hunting season with everything that goes on with hunting and all those things. And then, of course, we hit the showtime and stuff like that with the ATA and then Harrisburg, and then there's the Iowa Classic and so forth. So it just kind of felt right that we should just kind of do it while we were live and in person. And then as we started kind of talking, it's like, we all kind of know each other. And we thought, what would be a cool idea was just kind of take a lot of the questions that you guys have sent in. And so thank you first and foremost for sending these in. And we thought it would be cool just to kind of have a roundtable discussion with 4 hunters, 4 dudes that kind of know each other a little bit, some better than others. And we all have a similar style in terms of that we all hunt mobile. We all hunt somewhat aggressively in different kind of ways. Of course, Cody being pretty aggressive, Chad's really aggressive, and John's an aggressive hunter too, but John and I probably kind of teeter more on the patient side of aggressiveness or calculated aggressiveness or however you want to say it, but just a little bit different. So we thought, and some folks are hunting out of tree stands. I'm hunting out of saddles. So we thought it would be really cool just to kind of have a roundtable discussion to answer your questions and see, what the discussion kind of held with 4 different perspectives and 4 different points of view. So that's what we set out to do today. It was a really cool discussion. Had a great time doing it. Definitely going to try to do a few more of these. I know that we're all going to be at the Iowa Deer Classic. So I think that we're going to try to get back together while we're in Iowa at the beginning of March and kind of do a round 2 of this. So if you have burning questions that you want answered and you'd like the 4 of us to answer it, go ahead and shoot me a direct message on Facebook or Instagram, or shoot me an email and send me whatever questions you have, and we'll try to fit them in. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take care of the business end of this jam and talk about our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. We are brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear, the longest, lastest, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you have ever used. Simply put, the toughest saws on earth. How tough are they? Tough enough to come with a lifetime warranty. And right now, when you visit wickedtreegear.com, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get yourself a 20% discount on your Wicked purchase. We're also brought to you by Exodus Outdoor Gear. Of course, I was hanging out with those dudes at the Great American Outdoor Show. If you haven't heard, they have recently released their render camera, which is the cell camera that everyone has kind of been waiting for. These guys had a prototype about 18 months ago and kind of held off as they knew that there were a lot of kind of challenges people were having with cell cameras. So they kind of took all that into consideration and went back to the wood shop and put together a kick-ass camera that solved a lot of the problems that cell cameras were having on the market. The super cool thing is that it's a cell camera that you don't have to worry about what plan you have on your phone itself. It's run through an app, and the app will control from any device. Doesn't matter if you're Apple, US Cellular, or Verizon, whatever the case might be. You'll be able to control that cell camera from your phone through that app, get all your pictures directly to that app, and not have to worry about your cell provider. Right now, they're doing a pre-sale on these bad boys. I believe the regular price is $335, and their sale price right now, if you pre-order, you can pick this camera up for $299. So you want to make sure to jump on that, because I know they only have a limited amount of inventory left for their pre-sale. And then these bad boys will ship out in April, so you will have it in plenty of time for Velvet Fest. So don't delay. Head over to ExodusOutdoorGear.com and pick up the render pre-sale, or you can pick up a Lift or a Trek. They have those in stock, of course, too. We're also brought to you by Tecumseh Seed. Everything is bigger and better in Texas. No matter if you're in the South, Midwest, or Northeast, Tecumseh has your food plot seed needs covered. I'll be getting ready to do a little bit of frost seeding on the family property here in the not-so-distant future. So visit Tecumseh.com and check out the product selector tool to help you pick the right food plot seed for your needs. Use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save 20%. We're also brought to you by Glacier Coolers, simply the world's finest. Whether you're hunting, camping, or fishing, you'll enjoy smarter design, stronger construction, and superior insulation of Glacier Coolers. Be sure to pick one of these up. They are as badass as any of those high-dollar coolers on the market, but for a working man's budget. So visit them at glaciercoolers.com. Use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself 20%. And now, without further ado, let's get the crew on the line. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. We're here at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg, the end of the train. Everyone's looking a little worse for wear, a little haggard. like Merle, maybe?
Yeah, no, I'm good, man.
You good? You feeling strong, Cody?
I'm wrecked.
You wrecked?
Yeah. Need a break.
Yeah.
Chad, how are you?
I'm with Cody. I'm wrecked.
You're with Cody?
I'm ready to get the hell home.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's been a long time.
Yeah.
And now we got like a snowstorm coming in, I think.
Yeah, we're
No.
driving into the bad stuff.
No.
Nice. There's the only way to travel though from a show, right?
Well, we got like a 36-foot box truck. We're like ice road trucking it. The way
Ice road trucking it.
We're gonna follow you.
That's what's.
Nice. So today we're doing a little bit of a different format. We do have Instagram Live going, so we'll try to capture some questions from anyone out there listening. Usually John and I do a session. We have a guest on, we do an interview, but since we had a crew here together today, we figured we'd do a roundtable discussion, and we had some folks write questions in for John and I to kind of cover, but we figured what better way to cover questions than to kind of cover it from a bunch of different angles, from a bunch of different dudes that hunt a bunch of different ways. So that's kind of what the format will be today. So before we start, though, we should probably do some intros around so everyone knows who's on the panel. So first to my left, Cody DeQuisto.
Yep.
From Lone Wolf Custom Gear, XOP. How you doing?
Yep. Good.
Good?
Yeah.
Feeling good?
Feeling good.
Awesome.
Ready to talk about some whitetails.
Nice. Johnny Utah, as you guys all know him from Arrow Wild and Wicked Tree Gear. Tecumani, my brother from another mother.
That's right.
Chad Sylvester, who is also like my brother from another mother.
I feel like I could be like the third co-host of Truth and Mystic.
You could.
I'm like sneaking in behind John.
Yep. Nice. So let's get this party started. The first question that came in, and this we'll tee up just an easy one here to get things started, and we'll start with Cody here. We'll just kind of go left to right. So the question that this fella had was, do we ever use estrus or any type of lures during the season to bring in deer, and how do we use scents just in general across the season?
I have never once used a deer scent.
No?
Nope. No scents. No peas. No cover scents. Yeah. That's all I have to say about that.
That's all I have to say about that.
I can't speak on that. I know guys who have good luck, but I just never done it.
Right.
I've never tried it.
Yeah. John?
So I didn't even know what they were when I first started hunting, and then once I did find out what they were, it was like everybody who starts like picking up rattling horns. You do it every single time you get in the woods or whatever. You don't know any better.
Right.
So I wouldn't go into the woods without deer pee. I mean, I was spraying it on myself, mouthwash, whatever. And then now I use it like way more strategically. Yeah. Well, I missed it, and then I walk into it.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
No, now I use it a lot more strategic. If I have a buck, like, and we talked about this on the podcast that we recorded a few days ago. If you have a buck that hits a scrape, and then like an hour later, a little scrub buck hits a scrape, and then that big buck comes right back 10 minutes later, I'm like, okay, he's a territorial buck. He's in the area, and buck, urine might be the thing to like get him, piss him off, kind of thing. So
right.
I use it. I do like it that, and I probably use it more early season, trying to capitalize on that. As soon as they go hard horn, they're ready to rack.
Right.
And instead of being one of a million does, I want to be the first doe.
Right.
So those are like the times I use it the most now. But again, very strategically,
Right. How about you there, Rodeo?
Somewhere in the middle of the two, I guess. Most of the stuff I do in public, I have played with scents a little bit, and whether I'm doing something wrong or the product just isn't there, I've never had them work.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's like I don't waste my time or my money.
Yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't know. To your point, it's because I'm hunting a lot of public and stuff like that. And I'm hunting Pennsylvania too, which,
sure,
it's how many guys are in the timber with scents doing something, right? So that just becomes a negative kind of association for them most of the time. What I mean? I've tried every brand you can kind of think of. I've tried drag ropes. I've tried just kind of putting it on the bottom of my shoes to cover my scent whenever I've been walking in. I've tried hanging something from the tree, like a wick of some sort, to just see if I could get something to catch a whiff, but to no avail. So I'm kind of in the same boat with Chad. It's I don't waste my time too much. Now, when rut does get late and I haven't seen anything, I will start like freaking out a little bit, go like, I need to cover myself in some doe piss or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I'm the only sucker.
Well, I've seen.
I mean, to that point though, I mean, listening to what you're saying, it sounds like
if it's working,
I feel like
yeah.
that's a good strategic way to use it.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's. I could definitely see that bringing a buck in there,
Yeah.
and being the first one. And,
I think if people were to use it, I think in the fashion of using mock scrapes and in scrapes is the way to do it, not putting drag ropes on your feet. And I mean, to each their own. But I never really got that. Like, access is such a big deal. Why would you want? Why would you want to draw an animal to cross your access?
And maybe even more so now because of, there has been light years of scent elimination technology that's come out, like on your walk-in or on your trail-in. I think a lot of guys probably did it almost as cover scent. Yeah. I don't want to smell like a dirty human walking in. At least I'll smell like a dirty doe.
Right.
I think
the old DDs.
I think somebody back in the day was using that deer piss for the drag rope feature of it or whatever. And I'm sure bucks get on it and they follow it, but I've had big mature bucks cut my track and follow it, like with no scent. They do that. Deer do that. Mm-hmm. I think it was like coincidental. Like, oh shit, man, I did the drag rope and it worked. Exactly. I guarantee that buck was probably cut that track and was seeing what the hell it was and seeing where it went and made sure it left his area, and then he got shot. And then everybody's like, oh shit,
it works.
Yeah. I think we sometimes underplay their curiosity. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
I know this year, whenever I was in the stand, whenever I had that one nice deer in the swamp that I was hoping to see, he came in while I was getting set up because he heard something scraping a tree, and he was just kind of wondering, who the hell's in my spot? You know what I mean? He was just kind of coming in to check it out.
How dare he?
Exactly.
How dare you?
Right. All right. So the next question here, this fella writes in, and I think this will be an interesting topic because I think we have a bunch of different dudes here that kind of hunt different ways, but biggest pros and cons of using saddles to hunt versus mobile stand setups. So we'll kick this over to Cody because I know Lone Wolf Custom Gear just came out with some.
We got the guy with the Hoover over there.
Yeah, got the vacuum cleaner rolling.
This podcast episode brought to you
by Ghost Blinds.
Nice.
Ghost Blinds and their vacuum cleaner, made by Beck.
All right, but biggest pros and cons: saddles versus mobile setups, mobile stand setups.
So we got a saddle coming out, as well as what I think is going to be a pretty awesome mobile setup. But to that point, I've messed around with saddles a little bit, or saddle platforms. I can't seem to get into them, but I've never took the plunge. Like, I've never really dedicated myself to, like, okay, I'm hunting with a saddle this year. I just, if you could have a hang-on tree stand that was with your sticks, that was as light as a saddle stand with your sticks, why the fuck would you pick a saddle? Like that, right. That I don't know. That's how I look at it. I think you're more versatile with the tree stand. You can get it in better. You're not. But then again, I'm a sitter.
Right.
So like I'm always sitting. I'm not standing. If I was a guy who always stood, maybe I would like the saddle more. Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense because I know I heard you talk about the fact that when you'll set up specifically to take that seated position where a buck's going to come from your left to your right. You're going to set up to take that strong side shot. So that totally makes sense. For me, Chad and John know it's like I've kind of taken the full saddle plunge this year, and I am a stander in the saddle. So for me, it makes a lot more sense. The one thing that I like about it is I've never been able to kind of get around the entire tree to get a shot on the back side of the tree if I need to. And I know you're setting up strategically to kind of, you're targeting a buck, and you're saying this buck's probably going to come from here because I know he's bedding here, or he's coming from food and he's going to bed here. A lot of times when I'm setting up, just for me, I don't have as much time to spend in the timber. You spend a lot of time scouting. So for me, I got a week, and I'm going, I got to kind of place a lot of the odds here. Yep. So being able to get a shot on the back side of a tree or whatever works to my benefit, just because of the amount of time that I might not know the area as well as I need to know that I can set up for that strong side shot all the time.
That roll around.
Yeah.
And I've talked to saddle hunters too, and guys that helped us develop the new platform and alike, and they correlate a lot of the saddle success too with how your body is in relative to a tree.
Yeah.
So coming off a tree like a branch, it does look a little more natural, I'd say.
Sure.
Coming up and out, and I know guys who are straight killers that use a saddle.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't get into it.
What about you, John?
I haven't gotten into the saddle thing. I can't say that I've really tried it either. Mm-hmm. I do see a lot of the advantages for mobile hunting and getting into places, and it's going to be easier. Man, I'm a stander in the tree stand. Cody and I were talking about this. He was saying he likes to sit, from a tree stand position, and I probably sit maybe 5% of the time.
Right.
And it's more just to kind of like take a little pressure off my feet or something. Then I'm back up. But under the same principle with a saddle, looking like a tree, I'm trying to be the tree trunk. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to lean up against it the whole time. But it's allowed me to, to move more this way.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with the saddle is, like, I have been rigged up before, back in my landscape days, rigging that way. And I always think about it, like, if I'm up against the tree, and then I'm like, what do you do? Like, have your feet, like, I can just picture it running around the bark of the tree, you know what I mean? Trying to get to the backside, and I'm just like, I don't know, man.
Right. I mean,
and then are you swinging? Oh, shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes a minute
lift?
to get used to.
You got to lift and go through?
Well,
or
to get over your bridge, you have to lift. You're going to take a weak side shot, right? But for me, what I'll do is I'll try to pick trees that are basketball size or smaller, because I can literally kind of move around the entire tree and shoot over to this side without. So the only time I'm taking a weak side shot is probably like 1 to like 3.
Now, are
1 to
you
3 o'clock.
Now, let me ask you this: so if you're fixed in, and when you're swinging all the way around, for that, like, completely, instead of just hitting them like that, are you still stable?
Oh,
because aren't you really swinging like to your max?
No,
is there any
I
sort
think that's
of
the way
pull?
I'm looking at it. Are you like really?
Is there any sort of pull back to center from your connection
what you
point?
start to learn how to do, and this is probably the biggest like learning curve of a saddle, is you have to learn where the pressure is going to be on your body, because it's less about your shoulders and more about your hips. So you're using your saddle as a leverage point to kind of back into it, give you that stability. So it's just a matter of like relearning where your stability is going to come from, because it's not necessarily going to pull you back, because you're pushing into it, like to give yourself like a rock solid foundation to take that.
Or you're
shot.
pushing back.
You're pushing into your saddle.
Yeah.
Using your legs, and like he said, you're actually
It would be like we were doing the other day.
It's a little bit of core strength.
I mean, if you guys have ever used a sex swing, it's very simple. No, I'm just kidding.
What's that?
What are those?
What about you, Rodeo? What do you think?
I've done both, man. I had.
Are you a saddle hunter? You've been saddle hunting?
I've had an old trophy line for like 5-6 years. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that specific product, right? I think some of the new saddles and the new products to market are a lot better. I think you guys have basically kind of hit every strong point of both systems, whether it's a mobile stand, saddle. You can sleep in a saddle a little bit easier than you can a tree stand. You don't have to worry about falling out. So, if you're the guy that is taking climbers in and taking naps, for all day sits, maybe you get the saddles. But here's what I would say: I get tired, and you and I have talked about this. It's like you talk to all these whitetail guys and how big and bad they are, and how far they go, how deep they go in the public, and what they do when they go out west, how many miles they put on, and then they bitch because a stand is 11 pounds versus 9 pounds, and they're like, oh, I got to use a saddle because I'm saving a pound. If a pound makes a difference for me walking 2 miles, I need to get to the goddamn gym and do a little exercise.
No, heard that. I mean, for me, it's a little bit of the weight thing. It's just, but my setup is literally, I'm using a really simple setup to where I'm using aiders and stuff like that, to where my entire setup is maybe with the platform, all my ropes and stuff, we're talking probably 6 pounds, 7 pounds, like all in. You know what I mean? So that's probably like my entire setup, which is pretty light. Now, I have checked out the Lone Wolf custom like short sticks, because those for me would be like, because I can get those wrapped around quick and get up the tree, as opposed to using like wild edge steps or whatever the case might be that might take a little bit longer. So, I've definitely used a platform from a tree stand in my saddle because I wanted a little bit more room. You know what I mean? Yep. And I hung it, and I knew I was going to hunt that tree a couple times, so I left it there, and I knew I could get up into it with my saddle and just kind of be able to stand and be able to shoot around the tree, but have the luxury of having the entire platform, which is nice. All right. So next topic here is this fella writes in and says he wants to try to do some out-of-state public land hunts next year, and he needs a little advice. He lives in Georgia. He said he's looking to do a hunt on public land in Kentucky next year. He asked if we have any advice on how to select a piece of public to focus his efforts on. And he said it's hard for him to just do internet research because it seems like so many people don't necessarily volunteer a whole lot of information. There's not a lot of info out there for him from folks who've had experience. He said he just needs help in selecting an area, and then he can take it from there. He said, do we have any advice, and how do we pick the place that we're hunting public land when we're doing an out-of-state hunt? So essentially, he's looking to hunt a piece of public land in a different state. How do we go about finding that piece of public? We'll start with you, Cody.
Did it say when he was going? When
No,
is he,
that was-
when
I
is
think
he
that's
planning-
exactly what I was.
Yeah.
When is he planning his trip? I
Let's
think
assume
that
the rut, because most guys who are going to take
Okay.
a trip out of states are probably going to do the rut, so they have the best opportunities, I guess.
If I was going to an out-of-state piece in the rut, like I'd never been to Kentucky, but I would definitely look at aerials and look for hedgerows that intersect large chunks of timber, any sort of pinches like that between big food sources, and any narrow downs, funnels, and stuff of that sort.
Right.
And I'm not the November guy, so
Right.
but that's what I would do.
Right.
Um,
So that's
But
so.
yeah.
So I know you like to go after them, like when you can pattern them in early season. So if you were going to go for an early season hunt, then would you kind of take the same approach?
No,
or-
different. I would look for more so just big woods, a lot of timber that I knew was going to hold deer, that had substantial food sources that I know I could look at or try and catch them going to for sure.
Right.
And honestly, like with me, Kentucky is a big state, right? Really big state. I mean, there's a lot of timber, right?
Right.
In Kentucky,
Yeah, yeah.
or is
A lot
it more
of
open?
Hill country.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I mean, my biggest okay, if I'm gonna go early season, I know I'm looking for all that. Like, I know guys. A buddy of mine does a lot of research on. You can actually find out like how many hunters are in an area, or like hunters per acre. And if you wanna, he's an accountant too. So I mean, like that's how he looks
Numbers,
at things. But
yeah.
I would just pick a piece and then dedicate to that piece. Commit to that piece. And if nothing was there, I would know, and then I'd go to the next section and go so far. So maybe
Right.
pick a spot that you could go power scout one unit, and then if it wasn't happening there, you could always have a plan B, but not like spreading myself thin throughout the entire state for sure.
Right. How about you, John? I mean, I know you're a Kentucky native, so.
Yeah. So as a Kentucky native, I can tell you that Kentucky public is not the best. But I mean, there are pieces that border good private pieces and stuff like that. So anything
Right.
can happen. Where I moved from in Kentucky, in northern Kentucky, there was a piece of public that just gets pounded. So for me, like when I moved to Iowa, and people are like, "Oh, dude, you got that big shimmick forest like right next to your house. Like you're gonna love it." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." You know what I
Right.
mean? Like that's ridiculous. But the shimmick doesn't get pounded. Like nobody hunts it. So. It's different. There are places, there are pockets in Kentucky, and again, I don't want to like dumb it down and say that you're not going to kill big antlers, because I know that's not what hunting's all about. So I
Right.
don't want anybody to flame me for that, but I think most people, their target is they want to get on a good mature buck, and
Right.
if he's got nice headgear, that's a bonus, right? But
Right.
like Cody said, I think public.
Wait, is this guy meat hunting? Is he just going to kill it?
Yeah.
No, I think we can assume
I think
that if
he's
you're
going
gonna-
for a decent buck.
Yeah, if you're going to travel out of state, I would make the assumption that you're not going to.
He's not meat hunting,
plant
right.
something
Yeah.
you can plink in your home state.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm like Cody. I'm going to look for if there's a neighboring farm, especially if it's a ag farm that's got row crop near the edge of the property. I'm going to look for that, and then I mean, yeah, pinch points and funnels and ridges. But like if he's rut hunting, as we all know, like you could kill one in Walmart parking lot. Like anything can happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, not to sound like a cookie cutter answer, but I mean that's really what it comes down to. If you're not relying on people in the area,
Right. Rodeo, you and I probably have a similar response to this.
Yeah, I mean, I got a guy in Kentucky that hunts. When I say a guy, one of my boys, BG bow hunter, Josh Profit, who goes pretty damn hard on a limited amount of time, and 9 out of the last, I think, 11 years has killed at least a Pope and Young on public in Kentucky.
With a trad bow.
The last few years with a trad bow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that dude's getting it done. So it is possible. I mean,
Yeah.
not to downplay,
No. Yep.
or talk up Kentucky at all. But for me, if during the rut, everybody's taking time off work. All the public's going to be pounded.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's about access where you can. I would try to focus on 1,000 acres, like Cody said. Find one spot, dedicate some time, and learn that spot. And that starts with me for access. I would find spots where I don't think guys are going to be. Now, that doesn't mean that it's 2 or 3 miles from the nearest access point or road either. There are some overlooked spots that, maybe they're standing water that guys just don't want to cross because they don't want to put the work in.
Yeah.
So that's where I would start. And then also during the rut, I would honestly start focusing my attention around doe bedding. I mean, that's
Right.
Again, cookie cut answer, but
Yeah.
if you have 7 days, that's where they're going to be.
Right. It's like same with you. It's like that one piece in Ohio, it's like I found some great doe bedding. I continue to try to set up on that during the rut because I have action there every year. I think starting from the top, though, it's like if this guy's looking to find a piece, it's like find all the public land pieces, do some e-scouting, and figure out where they're at. Try to get away from any place that has like a larger metro area near it, because that's going to draw people from the city who want to get out to hunt, right? I think then kind of draw a circle around it, figure out where all your access points out there are going to be easy, and then kind of make a circle around those or inside of those that kind of go about a half mile. And then you got a piece there that you probably have that's probably going to be less touched than the rest of the pieces. And then from there, kind of outline, I think, what all you guys kind of said, like where are your hedgerows, where are your pinch points, where are your funnels, where are those features, and then boots in the ground and scout those and see what you see. You know what I mean? I think that's probably
you got to walk it.
Yeah, I think that's probably like one of the better approaches there. So this guy here, the next guy, it's a similar question, but he's asking more specific about hill country, and he wants to know, are there any region-specific tactics whenever you're hunting hill country based on land features or anything, or habitat features that could help him fine-tune his strategies?
Hill country, we talking like out here, like
Texas hill country?
Well, let's talk like Ohio hill country, because I think he's referring to, he's heard us talk about my hunts in Ohio and our hunts in Ohio, Chad, and I think he's kind of going, hey, I'm hunting some similar type of terrain. You know, you guys see some deer. I need a little help trying to figure out how to hunt some of these areas.
Yeah.
Or is there anything you guys are doing specifically for those type of terrain features and that type of habitat?
I mean, now I've never hunted Ohio. Mm-hmm. I've never been there yet.
We got to get you out there.
I don't. Yeah, I do look forward to getting to Ohio one of these days. So I don't know if the hills that I'm hunting would be, similar to the hills in Ohio, but there's a lot of in the steeper areas that I hunt. There's impassable spots that the deer go. There's like I find my best luck on like nooks and crannies on like these like sheer bluff cliffs that these bucks are hanging out on, and they're like, being able to like scope like entire valley. I've found, I like to look for dead deer too. Like that's one thing. Like, so I've killed a couple deer in spots where I've found like, they're like little death zones, like little, like cemeteries almost, like way on these ridges that, for some reason they just like, when deer are herd up, they feel safe there, they go die. And then I've killed deer early in those exact spots. But hills, the first thing I would do is I'd have to get out there and see what the wind's doing, because hills scare me.
I was just going to ask you that. Is there anything from a wind perspective that you found in hill country?
It does weird stuff.
Yeah,
that's why I like those. I'll usually hunt the tops just to get away with the wind, and then dive down deep when I find a good spot on those like variable days, like where the wind is so calm and I can count on that lift. But there's so many areas that when I get into a really hilly area, I just go walk, and then I maybe throw some of the milkweed out or do some checking with the powder, and it's so crazy that I don't even chance it.
Yeah.
So I just try and go find a spot and then back off that and figure out where that deer is going to be coming up to the top, and then at the next ambush point, then I'll go from there. So
hill country is just it's kind of a bitch, right? Because like you're dealing with the wind, and then you also have your thermals that are going to kind of screw you in the morning and the evening, right? It's like that's what that spot in Ohio that I found that's kind of money, because I've been set up. I've hunted it 2 years and I've never been busted in that spot. I've had deer downwind of me. It's just like it's one of those magic spots that the wind doesn't really matter what it's doing. The thermals always seem to act right with the wind every day, like to a degree, to where it's like it's at the top of a ridge, kind of what you're talking about. Because as I go down a little further, it gets a little squirrely, and the deer seem to like it up there a little bit better too, because that's where all the signs laid down. So I just kind of go. What about you, John? What do you find?
For me, like the steeper the better. And I want to get right to the edge of the steep, because I know they're not going to go straight down, some cliff.
Right. And
that's usually going to be a cross point, or they're going to hug that edge, and it seems like if they're going to be on one side or the other. And if you've got like a steep face, I'll try to find a hot trail or something like that. But, when you're going to some of these public land places that you haven't scouted and you've only looked at aerial, like you really have to go on just fresh sign what you're seeing. So you pick a hot trail and hope that it's still hot, or something's going to cut that trail or get downwind of that trail or something. Play in the thermals, get high. I've had some pretty good luck on extremely windy days and getting all the way down in those valleys, like where I'm talking crazy wind, where it's just so noisy that's where they feel safe, is down in the bottom, because it's not as noisy or whatever, and they can hear better. creeks, creek crossings down at the bottom of those in the big hills. And in northern Kentucky, that's a lot of, it's a lot of river bottom stuff close to the Ohio River. And that's what we would always do. We would always try to get top of ridges on non-windy days, hunt mornings, and then in afternoons, try to get, when it's hot, get down in the valleys and near the water.
Right. What about you, Radio?
I've spent a lot of freaking time in hill country. Basically, the last 3 or 4 seasons, excluding 2018, and it was all new to me. I grew up hunting ag ground. Like the easiest, perfect, prettiest farm laid out. Anybody could walk in there and kill big deer, and that's kind of what happened to me. And then I got the allure of hunting these big wood areas in hill country. Like, to your point, Cody, you have to be able, you can look at the weather and see what the wind speed and wind direction is, like what it's forecasted, but you don't know what it actually is going to do until you're at that point.
Correct.
And you drop your milkweed.
Well, how much to that point, it's like, and this is for all three of you, like how many times have you done a set either out of season or maybe very early season where you're just kind of still making your plans and just went to set that set to see what the wind was going to do on a specific wind direction, so you knew later in the year whenever you wanted to really hunt that area that you would kind of know what the wind was going to do. So the wind, to your point, might be a northwest wind, but you get to the spot and you're in your stand, and now all of a sudden it's a southeast wind, right, because of how the wind's going to swirl, right? Because there's a difference between wind direction, what thermals are doing, and wind current, right? Those are all different things. So do you guys ever do that type of stuff to kind of wind map?
No, I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
I'll screw it up.
Right.
I'll bust a deer first.
Yeah.
I will. I did it. It happened to me real bad one time, and that, like, ever since that day, I take more caution to it. But the way I look at it is, okay, if I'm hunting a deer, if I'm trying to get at that deer, and I find the perfect ambush point, and it's in one of those draws, like, I'll do my best to surmise what the wind's going to do, but like I might check it out, but even like when you're, like you said, to your point of like mock setting up a stand, even when you drop that milkweed on the ground versus 30
it's
feet
different.
up in the tree or 20 feet, it does something different. So, whether it's like bouncing off a ridge or I had this steep crack that I hunted one time, and I was sure I was going to kill this deer, and he came out, and he was coming in to like 20 yards and just got smacked in the face like somebody hit him with a baseball bat. Like when that wind sucked down and eddied and funneled straight up that draw, and I never seen him again, but I just ended up busting him out.
Yeah.
Because but at the same point in time, I'm always kind of torn on that, because it's like it just so happened, like that shit gusted up, like it just picked up as he came down out of that like little canyon there.
Yeah.
If it wouldn't have, that deer would have been dead.
Right. Yeah.
It would have took a little longer to get in there, and he was like 5 feet in front. So like I could have killed him, and I might think different about it today. But so I think I want to take that chance, but also be cautious of it.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, even with all the negatives and how hard it is sometimes to hunt kill country, there's a lot of benefits too for access. If you know what the wind's going to do, you can use some of those ridges and
Dude, flat ground for access sucks.
Yeah, you can use it not only that to visually hide yourself, but you can also use it as a wind barrier to keep your scent in a certain area.
Well, you can also use some of those land features too to better funnel deer, right? So you set up at a point where they can't get behind you or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So even if you don't have a great wind, you can kind of set yourself up to kind of work that not great wind.
Not only that, you get on a ridge, and you can count on those thermals dropping, and you got a giant crevice, or I don't know what the hell you call it.
Crevasse.
Crevasse. Like a giant
big
crevasse.
drainage or something.
Yeah, but
deer aren't going to be.
I've hunted the wrong wind on those sets, just waiting. Like, okay, the deer are probably going to not come out until maybe 30 minutes, like right when that sun goes down, because it's real hot out. Mm-hmm. And I hunt the wrong wind. The wind's actually blowing right out to where they're going to be. And as soon as that shit takes over, it's like those real steep banks, and I've killed deer that way too.
Yeah.
Why, you can't hunt that stand with a north wind. I'm like, watch me.
Yeah.
Watch me do it.
I think there's a big misconception about thermals too. Like people think as soon as the sun comes up, boom, thermals are rising, or as soon as the sun starts, like at 3 o'clock, they think it's going to be dropping because it's the evening. Like that stuff happens a lot closer. in the evening, a lot closer to sundown, and then a lot later in the morning than what people realize.
Exactly.
Like,
Well, just think about, like,
unless
if
you're around water, like
Water's a
and
different
land
change.
are two different things.
Yeah.
Two different things, especially if you have standing water versus flowing water.
Right.
Like, I love setting up against large bodies of flowing water because, I mean, we threw in 20, 30 feet. That happened when we were at Coshocton. There was a couple of spots where I could hunt with almost any wind because that water was so cold and flowing so fast, it was taking everything.
Yep. Yeah, those. I mean, and that's to a point there. I mean, like just setting up on those little spots like that I can get away with it. There's a moving creek down in this bottom. Well, let me get tight to that and on a cross section.
Yeah.
When normally you probably wouldn't get away with it if it was just a.
Right.
And even height too, man. That stuff it drops like a rocket. And I was hunting the edge of a cliff, and there was like this like little billy goat trail. It almost looked like that all these deer were coming off of, and I thought for sure I'm like. And they were skirting around the entire rim and spitting out the backside, and I couldn't get over there, but they came up, and I would have had them at like 2 feet. Like I was literally on rocks. Like I had a stand set like a foot off the ground on this little cedar that came out of the rocks and then came up. It was super scary.
That's sketchy.
It was like 80 feet up.
That's sketchy.
But I'm thinking like, okay, this deer literally is going to be 80 feet below me, and it's and there's no fucking way. I'm thinking like, okay, the wind's sailing off this ridge.
Yeah.
Like it was sailing off it. I mean, it was a stiff wind. It was cold as shit. So I'm like, okay, and sure enough, I seen him. He got up out of his bed and he worked down the rim, and he's taking this little. It was an old logging trail, but like there must have been erosion to that point, and it was like this tiny little shelf. So I literally could have spit on his back probably, but he's 80 feet down. As soon as that fucker got right under me, he was like, and he took off so fast down this ridge that I didn't even think he could get down. It was 8 counties over, like that. And I'm thinking, well, no shit. I'm like, okay, well, drops pretty quick, doesn't it? Like, like that. And even with that stiff wind, so now I don't try that anymore, But it's.
Yeah, I think it's the dudes that kind of are sitting here like hunt relatively at varying levels of aggressiveness. Sure. You know what I mean? So it's like for me, I'm trying to be more aggressive. And we can talk about that later, more related to sign. But for wind, for me, it's like I don't have a lot. I'm a working dude like everybody else. So it's like my time in the timber is kind of limited, right? So I a lot of times have to take a chance on a wind if I'm going to go hunt a specific spot, right? Because if I wait for the perfect wind, I'm just probably not going to hunt it. That's just kind of what it ends up being.
Yeah.
So.
And, and I've had those seasons where there was a particular buck that I was chasing, and legitimately I've done it. I've sat down with an Excel spreadsheet and documented like trail camera photos. Like, like on this day he came in from this direction on this wind. Like I was at, dire straits. You know what I mean? I'm pulling out all the guesswork, and I'm like really trying to plot stuff out. And sometimes you can actually start to track a pattern, and at least figure out what loop they're making or where they're making the loop from.
Right.
But it's kind of catch-22 because I do it myself. I'll do it on a Monday, then Tuesday I'm like, that was stupid. And then on Wednesday I'm like, screw it, let me try it again. Where I'll go into a brand new place and say, screw the wind. And I'm just really going on that like surprise attack,
right.
Like we all talk about. First hit's the best hit. Even though my wind might not be perfect, I'm thinking, you know what? I still haven't been there before, so I think he's going to be there. And if I can get him on that edge of that scent cone or something, maybe I can get an arrow off before he does pick me up. But
right.
Trial and error. I don't know. I'm like Cody too. Like I probably learn as much from my mistakes as I do success.
If I'm not, then I'm
success
screwed.
For me is false success.
Right.
Because like I said, it goes back to the guy that rattled the first time, and he had some buck come in. So now he's rattling every time. So I really think I learn more from my failures than I do, especially on wind. And wind's the biggest one. I teach myself something every year. Yeah,
wind's one of those things where it's such a hard thing to kind of understand because they smell like we see. You know what I mean? Like essentially,
I think they smell better than that.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean,
I don't see that.
Their world though is a scent world, where ours is a visual world. Sure. It's just like it's hard to understand how they're.
That's their number one. I mean, that's how they're. That's why I think like, and even like, you're talking about going in with those iffy winds, man. You got to cut that, man. You got to cut that habit. It's like that's the one thing. Like to that point, okay, that buck I just told you about that busted me. Yeah, I went in there and it didn't work. But every molecule in my brain, whatever the hell you want to say, I thought for sure that thing wouldn't smell me. Like in my mind, I wasn't taking a chance. In my mind, I was.
You thought you were bulletproof.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I thought there's no way. So it wasn't. I think when you start getting into that habit of, well, I'll just hunt here. So many guys don't realize it. They're getting busted.
Without no
They're getting busted, and those deer are miles away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy, man. If you ever seen like, you know, a big deer, a mature deer, any deer for that matter, in open country, bust you at like a fucking mile away, like,
Yeah.
and it happens, dude. It is some humbling shit.
Yeah.
Like you really realize, like, oh damn, like.
And so how many times does that happen in the timber when you don't see?
Well, that's what
You
I'm
know,
saying. Like, there's so
Yeah.
many.
They're
That's
a half
happening.
mile down.
That's
wind.
happening.
And you're like, hey, John's up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So next question is this fellow lives in North Carolina and he hunts land in a mountain region. He said it's comprised basically of about 20,000 acres of public land and 20,000 acres of state park full of ivy thickets, creeks, open and mixed timber, and a bunch of really extreme topography changes. Mass crop, he says, is everywhere. He said he's hunted it and scouted it hard the last 3 seasons, but hasn't seen a whole lot of deer. So
Move on. Why is he there
Right.
the third season?
Right. He said in those 3 seasons, only 3 racked bucks, one of which was 130 inches, which he said is good for his area.
Okay.
So he says that sighting alone is the reason he kind of continues to go back. He's talked to biologists and so forth to try to figure out, if there was better food somewhere. He said even though it doesn't show much sign, he's talked to the biologists, explanation of deer density. He's run trail cameras. He only finds a few, bits of scattered sign. He said he knows he's, heard us talk about Dan and Fulton's, like the hill country is hard to find deer and even harder to kill. So he tries to hunt bed to bed and transitions and funnels with limited sightings. Do we have any suggestions based on our experience that could help him fine tune or completely change the way he goes about hunting? And what I'm thinking is like this is big woods. Like he's talking big woods where you're going to have long lines of movement and probably less defined lines of movement, right?
Yeah.
So Cody,
Yeah.
you want to kick us off?
He's in North Carolina.
He's in North Carolina
Man,
because you have an area in North Carolina that you get into like those like the Smokies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So weird.
Let me-
I've
let me-
never been to Kentucky, never been to North Carolina, never been to Ohio. Never this is. We need to switch this over to the Midwest. I don't know what North Carolina looks like, but it sounds to me like this guy's doing his diligence, right?
Yeah.
So he knows what he's doing. He probably knows sign. He's listening to the right people. Get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Go somewhere else. That's what I would say. Like,
Right.
now if he doesn't feel he's confident enough in like finding these deer, which it doesn't seem like he got on the good bucks in the area.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing. He's looking for the right stuff. Then I would just start researching other places. I mean, I don't know if that's
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I'm right there with you. Like if he
Unless-
spent 3 seasons out there and he's talking to the biologist and he's looking for the sign, but I don't like the bed to bed thing so much because it sounds like he's just pounding that, and he might be actually keeping himself from seeing anything. Like he
Right.
might want to switch up the tactic there and get out of the bedroom a little bit. And if it's such big country like that, that's my thing. Like the bigger the woods,
it's
bed
hard.
to bed is hard. It's
Well,
a
yeah.
lot harder, to do.
We've spent a lot of time in big wood settings. 60,000 acres plus, very little structure, very, very low deer density. So my experience with big woods is probably a lot like what this guy is. And the one thing I would say is use historical data around the rut from your goddamn trail cameras.
100%.
Yeah.
Because those deer,
They do the same thing.
well, yes, but there's food everywhere, right?
Yeah,
So if there's mass crop everywhere, it's really hard to pin down
especially,
deer.
I wish I knew
There's-
how much of this was clear cut too, because that would
Well,
be
yeah, find. I mean, I think that's the basics, right? Find edge, find structure, and see where potentially those deer could hole up. But a year-to-year pattern around the rut. If you look at your trail cameras, they will tell you
that
when a
supposed to be on?
specific deer. Oh, I think I think that just timed out or something.
Oh. I was like,
We lost it.
I'm just curious.
Use your trail cameras. I mean, you let them run 365 and look at that historical pattern. Those deer will hole up for 2, 3, 4 days, and then you have that small window to get on them. And if you miss that window, they're somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing so that's kind of what helped in Ohio this year, right? Is near that doe budding. I think the one thing too, around the rut and using your trail camera data is a good idea, just because one thing that I learned from the dude from MSU Deer Labs, biologist guy, was that does will pass their breeding dates to their doe fawns. So if you can find an area that bucks are kind of cruising during the rut around doe bedding, that bedding area is going to come in the same time every year because it's probably the same doe family group that's using that, right?
Yeah.
And so using that intel to kind of figure out what time certain ridges or certain funnels are going to turn on because they're traveling between doe bedding to doe bedding is probably your best bet, because the one thing that we saw in the big woods, I'm not as experienced as you are, Chad, but is that and this is something that I think Jeff Sturgis talks about too, is just like the long lines of movement, right? There's food everywhere. So they're not bedding here, eating here, and coming back. Like they're bedding here, eating here, then going to this bed, and then just kind of whatever their pattern happens to be, which is just a lot longer and less defined.
Yeah, and I think that's a general rule. The bigger the woods, the bigger the trail.
Yeah.
Like the more they're going to travel. That's what I've seen from Kentucky and then even moving to Iowa. And it's such a big difference, like where I'm hunting, and then you go to the middle of the state, and you have more fingers and stuff like that. And I swear I want to put a pedometer on the bucks down there in Lee County. I mean, it's got to be crazy how far they're traveling. It's insane. But, yeah, bigger the woods, bigger the trail, longer the trail. But that's where that habitual trail camera stuff can really pay off. And you hear about those guys that are like, I passed that buck on November 8th at 5 p.m. last year, and he showed up not on November 8th, but November 9th. He was in the exact same trail at the same.
Right.
That's how Matt got on that big 160-inch 9-point.
Yeah.
Right.
Historical trail camera.
So with trail cameras, like how are we all using those? I mean, Cody, how often are you, and how much are you using trail cameras? Because I think people look at trail cameras as like the magic bullet, where it really should just kind of be a tool, like a piece of the puzzle, but not the entire puzzle, right? So how are you kind of typically using your cameras?
I don't do any. I don't do. We were talking about that the other day with Chad and Jake about like historical data and getting into some of that stuff, like looking at. I don't do any of that. I dropped the ball on that. I might try and start doing some stuff like that, but I use them primarily for inventory purposes. Now, that's coming into season, maybe that first couple weeks of season. I usually check them a couple times, and then they end up sitting there and going dead, and then I'll pull them after the season.
Right.
Like that's kind of like my strategy. I want to see what bucks I got. I pretty much know what they're going to be doing, and then I go look for then what. Like if I get a good picture of it, then I'll just go figure out what it's doing. So I like to get that one, even if it's a blurry piece of shit photo, just one photo.
Yeah, you're looking for inventory, saying who's around here, right? As opposed to I'm going to continue to move these and pinch down on where he's at. You're going to actually just put boots on the ground and go find him.
Yep, and even like a property that, like let's say I maybe if I was looking at a piece of ground that I never been to or something, I'll go toss up just a few sporadic trail cameras in spots that I think would be good spots that deer would move through, just to get that inventory.
Right.
But we talked about too, like sometimes I'll leave them and then they do go dead, and then after that I look at them and it's cool to see like that.
Right.
Like that how the whole season played out in that one spot. It's definitely cool to see and what moved through there. But I've never went as far as to actually like documenting that stuff.
Right. Right, but when you see something like throughout the year play out, right, it's like you'll look at that and like in the back of your mind you might go, I'm asking, not putting words in your mouth. You might say, this is something I need to pay attention to next year. I mean, do you kind of look at it from that perspective? So if you're clicking through and you're like, man, I see this deer keeps hitting this area that scrapes in that I know is here, and he's hitting it around the 28th of October or whatever. In the back of your mind, are you thinking that might be something I need to check out right around like mid-October to see if he's laying down sign?
No, not at all. I just think that like scrapes light up at a certain time of year. Find the scrapes that are lit up and kill a deer on that scrape. Like I don't complicate it.
Right.
Like so, I won't see a scrape. Now there are primary scrapes. I got primary scrapes that light up every year, but I just see that without having a camera there. And there's a lot of times I've actually killed deer 60 yards from a primary scrape on a fresh scrape that just was opened up, and that buck didn't even hit the primary scrape. So I just I don't like to. I just don't like to overcomplicate anything, and that's just the kind of way that I look at it. But so I don't look at that. I look at it as there's a good buck. Maybe he'll make it till next year. Like that would be the extent of like he worked that branch like 70 other fucking bucks did. Like it's it's one of those things where which I could be completely wrong. The next year that deer could have came there on the 31st, and I maybe could have had that crystal ball, but I never capitalized on it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's one thing though that I think you do a good job of. That's something I'm still trying to learn to do is trust myself in each given year to read what's happening then, as opposed to getting married to a spot or getting married to an area that lit up before that I'm going to go try to execute on the next year, because that buck might not be there anymore, right? And what has maybe the habitat has changed a little bit, right? There's a bunch of things that could change. It could change what that deer is going to do.
Sure.
But it's the hardest thing for me to do personally, is to kind of change that mindset and to be and trust my own intuition. You know what I mean?
Well, and I run a lot of covert cams, on leases, my personal farm and stuff like that. But I myself, admittedly, have fallen into that rut where I was like, that's gospel. Whatever shows up on the trail camera, that's gospel. And I've had seasons where I've almost let a whole season slip away and fell into that trap. And now I've gone back to more of it's a tool, it's an inventory. I know what bucks are around. I know deer density numbers, doe density numbers. But I love doing it for inventory. More of okay, these are potential targets that were at least in the area at some point in the year. I might have an encounter with them. Now let's find out where I can actually kill them at. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. And I start the year at like 25 cameras, and I actually start pulling them as the year goes on. And start, condensing those areas. And I still want to monitor areas, and it might be an area that I'm not going to hunt. I had a trail camera in public last year that I completely forgot about. So I'm shed hunting, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I got a stand I need to go tear down. So I'm tearing the stand down. I look over, and I'm like, damn, some other guy's got a camera. Oh, shit, that's my camera. And then I got then I'm like hauling ass home because I want to check the SD card. I checked the SD card, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There was like 2 just smokers that were like burning it up for like a week. Now, in my defense, I probably wouldn't have picked that week. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have killed them anyways, but it was nice to know they were there,
Right. What about you there, Rodeo?
I mean, I run you guys don't know, I run a ton of cameras. I mean, I have cameras.
How many cameras do you run? 76?
102.
What brand of cameras do you use?
102 cameras?
What brand of cameras do you use?
Reconics?
Do you run 102 cameras?
I don't know.
Actually, he's got probably like 10,000.
Well, here's what I do.
Accessible.
I know it's over 100 because I label all my cameras. Oh. Okay, so there's a number like 1 through 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, and then I label my cards and marry them to my cameras. So if I'm checking camera A, I have 2 cards like
A1, A2.
You gotta have some pretty killer data then.
Well, here's the thing with the historical stuff. Let me go back and clarify some of this because it's not the magic. There's no such thing as a magic bullet.
Yeah.
That is with, like, those deer doing the same thing year over year over year is with everything else, all the variables remaining the same. So habitat, outside influence, and that doesn't mean you got a picture of him on a scrape November 2nd, 2017. I'm not saying he's going to come back and hit that scrape, November 3rd or whatever the following year, but he's going to be what we've seen in the big woods is he will be in the area. Yeah. Maybe he's, 700 yards away, 500 yards away.
I think we
have so many damn cameras. Like, when you have that many cameras, you can kind of pinpoint and know that he's in that area.
I think a good thing, like just thinking about it, and this is stuff that I've even told myself I was going to do, but I just don't like to be out there in the summer. Mm-hmm. Is like, so a lot of these bucks relocate when they come in a hard horn. Yeah. Like John said, when they get the hard on, they don't want to be in the same area. So I think that is an invaluable piece of information you could get from a trail camera. Sure. If you have them spread out like that and you know where these bucks are living in the summer and then where they're going to, like that could be huge.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but that transition, like that I think is what you're talking about. That's huge. Right? I mean, that is like I never thought of it that way. Like I was always more thinking of it from a micro perspective of this time of year is he going to be in this area where that's
the shift.
Yeah. That's huge.
That double beam buck that I showed you guys. Actually, I know I've showed you pictures as well. That double beam buck, I had him so patterned out on my home personal farm, and I'm like, I'm going to kill this buck. And then all of a sudden he vanishes. So I'm over at my lease that's like a mile down the road, checking cameras there. Boom, he's over there, and I'm like, you dirty dog, know. But it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm glad I had another camera. And I know where he's at. And then, of course, I tried to kill him there, and I screwed it up. And then he ended up busting off a rack. But he'll be around next year. He's still alive.
Yeah. I think with trail cameras, everybody wants one recipe or one strategy to success with them, and there's just not.
No.
It depends on how many cameras you're running, what your
Don't you
hunt.
bullshit us, Chad.
Yeah,
What's the recipe?
The recipe.
What?
He's running over 100 cameras. He's got to figure it out.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Buy more Exodus Trail cameras. That is the recipe. No, I mean, I know.
You heard it here. If you want to kill bigger deer, you got to buy Exodus.
I know
102
guys
to be
that'll use
exact.
cameras like they're cutting tracks. They'll locate a deer on a
Yeah.
food source, and they'll use it, and they'll just start leapfrogging them until they have
Yeah.
that deer on the edge of daylight.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many different ways to do it.
Yep.
Yeah. So one guy wrote in a question, and I'll kind of paraphrase it. He hears a lot of folks, right, talk about hunting hot sign, right, especially with mobile hunting becoming like the more and more. And I'll say a lot of folks have done it, but it's become even more in vogue. He's talking about hunting hot sign, but he's confused. He might be a relatively newer hunter, and he's asking essentially, what do we classify as hot sign, and how do we know when the sign is the best sign to hunt at that moment?
Well, I would definitely have him start looking at like what a fresh track looks like opposed to what a an older track looks like. I mean, pounded areas. That's all. Honestly, I think it really gonna vary on your area.
Right.
If you're hunting a big piece of woods and there's like you said, they got a longer travel and they're not so condensed in one area. Like I've hunted farms that had trails that look like cow paths, and I'd literally be hunting with people, and they'd come up to me and they'd be like, "There's too much sign here. Like, where do I hunt?"
Can't prioritize.
Because you can look at it both ways. Everybody, I hunt this stuff, and there's not that many deer. But what about when you hunt a farm, and the deer population is literally so huge that how do you specify a certain buck? How do you know? Okay, well, where this deer is going. So it can be confusing in both aspects.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a trail that's just piss pounded.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's a pounded trail, but then there's pounded trails everywhere versus nothing. So I would focus on where deer are. Find actual deer.
Right.
Like if you're not
Best sign ever.
Jesus,
Best sign ever.
science.
but
Where
that's
are
the
the deer?
thing that people overlook.
Yeah.
I get so many times, hey man, what do I want to set up on? 4-finger tracks, 3-finger tracks. Does it got to be the size of my forearm?
Right.
What are you doing? Like, well,
Yeah.
a lot of these guys don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what a fresh rub looks like or a fresh scrape, or if that scrape was made 5 days ago. And then I just tell them, like, go find the deer. Like, where the deer are is where you need to be. It's very simple. It is so simple.
Right.
Sometimes it's harder to do because finding the deer is hard. Like, if you got thousands of acres, fucking strap them boots up, man, and just find
Well, I
the
think
deer.
that's it, man. Like people are always again going back to like, what's the magic bullet, right? And it's not like you kind of simplify it. And it's like just go find the deer. It's like it's really easy, but like a lot of things in life are easy, but executing it and doing it are hard because it takes a physical effort to go actually do it. It takes hours. It takes physical effort to make it happen.
Yeah. It's. I think I was talking to somebody yesterday at the show, and it was so cool because he came up and he was like, dude, he's like, I listened to one of your podcasts. He's like, and then I went out and killed a deer that next day. He's like, and I just walked and I found the deer, set up a stand, and I killed the deer. And he's like, it's my biggest buck. And he's like literally shocked. He's like, I've been hunting 30 years, and I just never looked at it like that.
Yep.
And he's like, I always was like,
Taking your time,
he's
looking at
overanalyzing.
the edges.
Just overanalyzing. Like, I mean, it's
When I started being more aggressive, like probably the past 2 years, I finally got to a point to where I was like, all right, I'm just going to start trusting myself a little bit more. I haven't killed a deer in 2 years. Well, actually, I did last year, but didn't this year. But I actually had more encounters with better deer.
Yeah.
The past 2 years once I started doing that.
Well, and I think what happens, and we've, a lot of us have encountered it or talked about it. I know personally, I've heard you talk about it a couple times on different podcasts, that you can spend like weeks and weeks like kind of pussyfooting around, and then you may run out of vacation time from your job, and you're like, ah, damn, I didn't kill him.
Yep.
If you just like day one would have went in there guns a-blazing,
balls out.
Now I got 13 days to go relocate another one.
Yep.
And
it's I think that's one of the things I know I've heard you say. It's like I'll go find another one, right? And it's just and people
sometimes and
sometimes
sometimes
it doesn't
it's not.
happen.
Yeah,
Right,
it doesn't
right.
happen. But
Yeah.
it's like bumping birds when you turkey hunt.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of birds out there, but you get those guys who are like, where are we going? You want to get like as close to the roost tree as possible? Like, well, yeah, let's just set up like let's so
get
we're
the
there when they
bedroom.
fly down. Well, what if we kick them up? Who
Okay.
gives a shit?
Yeah,
Then
we'll
we'll
find
go
another
find
roost
another
tree.
bird.
Yeah.
Now it's a little different when you got a buck you've been hunting for 17 years or something. Like these guys are waiting for. And
I mean, to that point, I would say, don't get so romantic and fall in love with a specific deer if you can't, if you know you can't get on them because of property, because of access.
Yeah, if he's not
location.
killable, move on.
Yeah.
It's like the hot chick.
Yeah.
If you can't date her, move on. You know what I mean? There's another hot chick out
take
there.
what you can get.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
I did that enough in college.
Yeah, I fell in love with. All right, we're gonna make a hard transition before any of us get ourselves in trouble. All right, so this one's kind of, I guess, maybe a moral or dilemma or whatever. But
you say moral dilemma?
Moral dilemma. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we're gonna get deep and philosophical here, maybe a little bit. Not really.
No. Okay.
No, he just says he's seen an article recently that the fascination of antler inches is ruining hunting. He says, how do we feel about that statement? So, whoever wants to take,
I'll take it first.
Yeah, you would take
I'll take this first.
All right.
I think I don't think it ruins hunting, right? Because as men, as providers for family, I think there's a competitive nature in our DNA, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think that you should hunt for your own personal reason,
Yep.
whether that's meat, whether that's enjoying time out in the woods. For me personally, and I've said this publicly, killing a mature deer, not a deer based on inches, is like the political thing to say. That's
Right.
not. I'm not gonna hold out and shoot a 7-year-old 130-inch deer if there's a 160-inch 4-year-old that I can kill.
right.
It's for me, it is inches.
Yeah,
and that's
right.
why I haven't killed deer in 4 years, because I have that.
Yeah.
My story is a little bit crazy. The deer that I've killed when I was younger, and then trying to
Live up
step
to
it
that,
up
yeah.
or live up to that, or
Yeah.
or do better.
Yeah.
Like, it's not an easy thing to do. So
Yeah.
whether people like it or not, for me, it's inches.
Yeah.
It's just
So-
it is what it is.
And like Chad just said, I mean, hunting is a violent thing. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? You're taking something's life, and I think the reason why all of us hunt the way we do, and we all have similar strategies that we're pushing it and going deeper, going farther into the timber and that kind of stuff. So like, it is that kind of alpha male type thing. So
Right.
yeah, I like big inches on antlers. I like mature deer because that's the challenge side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're older, they're smarter. But I've always said
I
it
disagree.
publicly. If there's a 180-inch buck and he's got spots on him, I'm shooting him.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
anybody
admittedly-
anybody who comes and starts talking about that is the worst thing.
Yeah.
Well, I let him go because he's 2.5,
No.
and you're
Yeah.
looking at a picture of it, and it's like
It's a good deer.
186-inch 6-point.
Yeah.
Well, he was only.
Yeah. It's just,
Did you really?
That's
Yeah.
what I mean. That's
Did
like
you really?
It's a
Yeah.
political cop out, right?
Yeah, it
like,
is.
It is.
Like, and I'm not saying I'm competing against John or I'm
Right,
competing against
right.
Cody or competing against Clint. It's like it's a
We all have
competition.
we all have
inside
our
of ourselves
Yeah, yes.
to
I
get
mean,
better.
that competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you not want to do better? I mean, I totally get it for people who get out in the woods. I love being out in the woods. I don't not love being out in the woods. And I get it for the guys who do be out in the woods. And I get it for the guys who are hunting harder ground to kill deer or the deer that aren't there. But on the same side, if you want to be a lion, then train with the lions. I
Yeah.
mean, if you want to kill a 180-inch buck,
That right there is
you-
the quote of the podcast. If you want to be a lion, be a lion. Train with the lions.
I
yeah.
mean, it's to that point. No disrespect to anybody, but I hear a lot of guys, and there's a lot to this. But I hear a lot of people that aren't positioned. They're not hunting that great of properties, and they might not be killing deer that often. And I tell them, I said, if you can't expect to be killing big deer if they're not there. So
Yep.
what you have to do, if that's what you're obtaining, if you want the big antlers, you have to look for different ground.
Yeah.
Whether that's find a lease, go hunt public, wait
Yeah.
4 years and go to a state that limits out-of-staters. I mean, there are things you can do.
Yeah.
You can make your own luck.
Yeah.
If like I said, you got to put yourself in those positions. Like, don't use the cop out of age. Don't
Yeah.
use the cop out of the ground you're hunting. If you
Yeah.
don't like the ground you're hunting, then get the fuck out.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's that hard to hunt that
Yep.
you have to tell everybody how hard it is to hunt before you tell any story about hunting,
Right.
then go find an easier piece to hunt.
Correct.
that's what I'm saying.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, hey, I want to tell you about my season. Keep in mind that I hunt southern Florida. There's not a tree there.
There's a bunch of asterisks
There-
that come along with the story.
Yeah, and it's like, and I'm thinking, and I had a conversation the other day about this at the show, and I love talking to guys at the show, and then like, oh yeah, what this or that, and he's telling me about this farm that he hunts in Texas, or I don't know where it was, Texas, Louisiana, or something, and he's telling me about like the last 4 years, and I was like, dude, why are you hunting there?
Yeah.
Well, why wouldn't I hunt? I'm like, you just told me the saddest story I've ever heard in my life. Like,
it makes me want to sell my bow.
I was like, get to a different state, move around.
Right.
So, with that being said, back to the original question. I don't even know where I went with that, but
I loved it.
Yeah.
It's there are things, prioritize.
Yeah.
A lot of people. Okay, well, I don't have the money to afford a lease. There's awesome pieces of public in states.
Free. We're
in
all
states
public
like
landowners.
in states like Kansas or states like
over the counter tags.
Over the counter tags. I mean, even Iowa. If you're waiting for that draw, it's a little bit more expensive. There's phenomenal pieces of public ground in Iowa that you could go. You could do your research.
I'm doing Iowa public land next year.
Yeah,
and that's it. You know what I mean?
And it's one of those deals where, the rack inch. It always sort of upset me a little bit that guys would downplay somebody for looking for a more mature whitetail, or even the trophy hunting aspect in general. Like, oh, well, you just want a trophy to hang on your wall. Like, so that deer, that buck, that is timeless. On my wall, I enjoy it. Every time I look at it, I think of that story.
Think of the hunt.
I mean, that's like a shrine to that deer. What better way to honor a deer's life than to mount that thing on your wall and like see it every day? I mean, the feelings that I get when I look at my mounts, I know how I felt. I know when it happened. I know how I made it happen. I mean, all that stuff resonates so deep with me, and the fact that now I eat the deer I kill.
Yep.
So for the fact that you to come at me like, oh, you just care about inches. Well, yes, I care about inches. I want a bigger deer.
Yeah.
Like that's my personal goal. I strive for big horns. I strive to kill specific deer. I strive to kill them close in proximity. Like those are the things that I want to get weed hunting. So who are you to tell me that that's the wrong thing?
Right. That's the point right there, right? Because I had a conversation with someone. It was like two weeks ago, and it's equally as wrong for me to project my goals onto them and say, if I want to hold out for a bigger deer, a more mature deer, I shouldn't tell you that you should, right?
Yeah.
And in the same breath, if that's not what if you want to hunt for meat,
sure,
I'm all for it, but don't tell me that should be what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So I think it's just a little bit of, I think what it comes down to, honestly, is just a mutual respect between hunters to let each and every one of us have hunting and make it be what it is we want it to be in our own way.
Well, everybody,
that should be fine for everybody.
Everybody bought their own tag, and they get to use that tag however they want to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we would all, I think it's I'll speak for everybody, I think here, we all would hope that everybody would, not shoot spikes and, button bucks and stuff like that. But it's their tag. If they do it, I didn't buy their tag for them, and I don't own the deer.
Right.
And talking about, the making those choices and like manning up and doing whatever it takes. I left Northern Kentucky's a pretty good buck spot, but to make it a great buck spot, I needed to buy land, and land's very expensive there, and the public is not that great there, and you can knock on as many doors, and it was just locked up. So I made the decision. I wanted to go to a big buck state where I could go shoot big antlers, So I moved to gravel roads, the satellite Wi-Fi, the worst internet in the world, and cell phones that don't work.
Yeah.
That I said, you know what? If I'm going to go shoot big bucks, I got to go to big buck country. So I made some sacrifices, and I mean, it was like having that conversation with the wife, like, hey, babe, vehicles will never be clean again.
We're gonna move to Iowa.
We will never watch Netflix ever.
Doesn't that suck?
It does kind of suck,
So I think to answer this dude's question, like really simply, is that it's not the fascination.
No, it's not ruining the sport.
No, the fascination of antlers is not ruining the sport. It's everyone's opinion about everyone else's hunting style.
Whatever it is,
pound it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you're striving for, just own it. Like, you don't have to. You don't have to have those copycat answers that you're doing something else because someone else is doing it. Just own your shit and talk about it.
Well, and I'll throw one other word out there: jealousy.
Oh yeah.
A guy doesn't kill a big buck, and I don't care. The competitive nature always ends up breeding a little bit of jealousy. Somebody's doing better, or they got access to better ground. Well, I could have killed that if I had access to that ground.
I'll tell
Go
you this,
get
man.
That ground,
the guys. The thing is,
it.
the guys who are good hunters, like you could drop dudes that are killers from any state. From Iowa, if they hunt in Iowa and they kill big deer, you could put them in Pennsylvania, and if they're a good hunter, They're going to kill
big
the bigger deer
Yeah.
in Pennsylvania, right? It might not be the same caliber as what they would kill.
That's
in
how I know I'm not
Iowa.
a good hunter, because I haven't killed big bucks in Iowa.
Right. I'm going to try my hand at it next year. But we have just a couple minutes here before we're going to hit the national anthem and kick off this show. So before we do that, I want to give everyone a chance here, an opportunity to kind of tell us where we can find out more about you and what you got going on. So Cody, we'll start with you.
You can check out info at for custom gear and the new products like the stands and stuff we're doing at lonewolfcustomgear.com, and also anything on the XOP end of things at xopoutdoors.com, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, anything you want to follow me personally, my name, Cody DeQuisto on Instagram. I try and put up some stuff there. So, yeah, whatever you feel the
need to kind of peruse. Yeah, awesome. Utah?
Arrow Wild TV on Facebook, Carbon TV, YouTube, Instagram. Myself personally, Instagram, Johnny Utah Hunt. And, some of the brands, obviously, that I'm here with this week, Wicked Tree Gear and Glacier Coolers, set up at the Great American Outdoor Show.
And then Rodeo, you're kind of like the honorary third captain of this ship.
Of course, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, Exodus Trail Cameras on social, Exodus Trail Cameras on YouTube. Make sure you check this stuff out. And Trail Cam Radio, new podcast. We just started, 4 or 5 months ago. And then my personal stuff, Sylvester _Chad on the IG.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to say thanks to you guys for jumping on. Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
doing this.
Appreciate
This
it,
was
dog.
cool.
Sir.
Had a good time. And all you guys out there listening know where you can find me. So thanks for listening. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank the fellas for joining, and be sure to head over to check out Lone Wolf Custom Gear. They're doing a lot of cool things, of course, in the mobile tree stand scene that Cody is and his family, of course, are a part of. So be sure to check them out. They'll have some products. They have products up on the page or on the website now, and then they'll have more information there coming soon as far as like when release dates are and so forth. We'd, of course, like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those two things for us. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Tecumani Seed, Glacier Coolers, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
Anymore.